Welcome to this edition of the CUBEcast. My name is Chester with Cube, and I'm joined by Charles.
Hey everyone, I'm Charles with Cube, and we also have Weldon on.
Hey everybody. And Chester, I'm so glad you're back and you made it back safely after spending a week on an U.S. naval aircraft carrier in the Pacific and got launched.
My gracious.
That aircraft carrier.
I tell you, this is probably the most epic thing I've ever gotten to do in my entire life. And I have to say, first of all, the Navy was incredibly welcoming to us. Everyone that we worked with in the Navy was so amazing to take time to share their stories about their journey in the Navy, the job they did, their work center, show us, what it was like. Yeah, I spent a week on the Nimitz in the Pacific. We were able to see the entire flight operations from fuels, 7 decks down, to pry fly, which is the highest thing above the flight deck. It was incredible. It was epic.
I think my favorite thing was talking to your photographer, Kenton, and him saying how he still thinks he's going to get arrested by MPs any moment because of what y'all got away with.
I think he's scared to talk about it in public still.
And for those who have not seen the pictures, my gosh, what they have done is amazing.
Yeah.
To the point, Cheryl. Yeah.
I think we're going to have to do a podcast episode. I mean, I just don't think there's a choice in the matter because you've got some insights on leadership, you've got some insights on storytelling. I think things that will be, valuable to our audience. So let's do a podcast episode.
It'll be great. I definitely have some things I can talk about for sure.
Service, sacrifice. I mean, there's so much there than what you told me in the stories.
Yeah.
But today, we have got something really exciting lined up for you.
We've got a fantastic guest who's going to be joining us in just a few minutes. If you haven't heard our previous episode 2, go back and listen to that. And just a quick recap, because some of what we referenced in episode 2, we're actually jumping into now with our guest, who we'll introduce in just a moment. But we talked about audacious thinking and how audacious thinking leads to turning things inside out or upside down. Like, this isn't just the way we've always done things. We're not going to continue doing things just because this is the way we've always done them. Sometimes you find that aha moment, that sort of audacious thinking moment, by turning the thing inside out or upside down, looking at it a different way.
And before you're really looking at being audacious, you got to define what success looks like. What do you want out of that occurrence? As I said in the past episode, getting something sold at a discount is not necessarily success if it's a false limit that you're putting on yourself.
Yeah, and then you also have to be willing to not have it go the way that you intended. You have to be willing to learn from the process and be bold enough to kind of overcome that fear that it's not going to work out. And so we also played this little bit of a game where we played some samples of how these ideas can be applied to creative business audio. And those samples were produced by a very good friend of ours, Adam McGale, who is an absolute master of creative audio. Adam heads up Air Support Radio. We've been working with them for years, and I can genuinely say that their tagline is true, that Air Support makes the best damn radio creative on planet Earth. And so I am super pumped to welcome our guest today, Adam McGale. Hey, Adam.
Hey, everybody.
Now, from the previous episode, right, people will know that your kind of audacious style of audio creative can be a little bit edgy. And so I think people on the one hand are going to be intrigued by the possibilities and how powerful it can be. And then on the other hand, what might happen if it all goes horribly wrong, right? And so Adam does know both sides of this coin. In fact, didn't you once have a campaign that even drew the attention of the premier of one of our provinces here in Canada?
Yeah, Saskatchewan all wanted to kill me at some point.
Yeah, so we're going to delve into all of that, but let's roll the following clip and start there.
Legacy Heating and Cooling is the #1 company for families who don't want to see dad in his underwear. Because soon there's gonna be a heat wave and dad's gonna get really gross. So call Legacy right now before a heat wave forces dad into his Speedo. Get your comfort-chugging air conditioner from Legacy today and you'll have no payments and no interest for 1 whole year. Keeping dad from ruining your summer during a heat wave. That's how you build a legacy. Legacy Heating and Cooling.
So, Adam, tell us the backstory of this clip that we just heard.
Well, I've worked for radio stations for quite a while, and like I'd always been trying to get some sort of ad on the air like this, and like it's pretty hard to get people to say yes to these type of things, even though they stand out so well. And had like this one just had an immediate effect that just changed how this client business trajectory was working. But really, like the whole point to making something creative that's going to stand out is to do something that stands out. So and a lot of that is just like you guys have been saying, turning things on their heads. Like I always like to say that radio ads, like people don't hate ads like they would say. They hate bad ads. They actually get a lot of joy out of a good ad. There's just so few of them often that you don't really get that. And so people aren't really actively listening, trying to hear a radio ad when it goes through, right? They're not really looking to hear more ads. The amount of advertising that people see and hear in a day, we all have our own firewalls that go on that block out anything that's really a cliche. So you think of anything that people are used to hearing, that's so easy for people to ignore. And to be honest, most people who write anything write ads that sound like ads. And when you write ads that sound like ads, you end up writing stuff that is so easy for the human mind to just absolutely delete. When you're talking about like we have the best service and all that type of stuff that everyone loves to say, that just disappears. So then all of a sudden, when there's some idiot all of a sudden singing in the middle of a regular ad and obviously talking about dad in his Speedo, which is such a good visual. Like I always say, people are always shocked by it, but it's true that radio and audio is one of the most visual mediums that you can find because you're doing it all in your own head. Like you could all think of dad in his Speedo on that. And, it's grotesque and but funny at the same time.
It reminds me when I was a kid, I used to listen to, this is archaic. I didn't have a TV at one point in my life when I was a little kid. And I used to listen to this cartoon on a radio that could pick up TV signals. It was this Japanese animation film thing called Star Blazers. And I had this thing in my head. It was awesome. When I finally actually saw the cartoon, it was such a disappointment. It was so much better inside my head.
Yeah, imagine how much better dad in a Speedo would be in your mind.
So are you purposefully going after creating like a visual image in people's mind through that?
A lot of the times. It doesn't mean all the time. A lot of times it's just breaking people into paying attention. And that's really the main thing that I've found with this style of ad that we've done, because we run these for a couple of years now, and it's made a massive difference in the business. Well, I make new ones every month, and the one thing that is the same is there's always a sung element to it that pops out of nowhere. So it's not like a jingle where it's sung the whole way through, or it's maybe just the end. There's always some sort of funny thing, and it doesn't always have to be funny. It's just something entertaining that's in the middle of it that continues on every once in a while. And we try to end up just doing a different genre all the time. Like this one's sort of like a soul thing. And we'll do some like 80s metal and country one, and like a lot of 80s stuff. People really dig the 80s stuff.
What kind of feedback do you get, right, from people hearing this?
We get lots of different feedback. So these ones, like firstly, just playing them at the station, I get all the people within the station every time something comes out getting excited for the new one. We get listeners who are actually requesting them sometimes. Like radio's become a very text-based format where people are like the stations will have their own text lines, and a lot of the conversations go through having listeners text things. Like I know one of my stations gets like thousands and thousands of texts every day, and it's awesome whenever new ones come out because people will actually be referencing them in the text about that ad was really cool, and like you don't hear about that much.
I remember a podcast talking about the Real Men of Genius ad campaign, and that got so popular they started doing stadium tours and going around to various stadiums and doing some of those bits for Budweiser. And there was a Major League Baseball player that like ran over to the dude's like, dude, come here. I've got all of these on my laptop. And the guy's like, no, you don't. He's like, no, I've got them all. He's like, no, you don't. And so they kind of created this interplay. Like the guy was collecting his audio bits of Real Men of Genius on his laptop like we collect songs on Napster back in the 90s. And this guy's like, he held up a CD, goes, I've got all of them. And it was like this barter with this Major League Baseball player to get all the ads.
That's awesome. Yeah. People will get excited about these things. And really, it is just because they're different. It's something. And if you could get people to be excited about hearing your new ad, man, like you're really building a brand. And, a lot of it's just based around fun, too. Like I wouldn't say that all the ads that I make sound like the big national type ads where you get the baritone voice guy to do whatever. And you don't need to do that. You just need to, a lot of it is just about having something actual to say. It's kind of like a pill that you're making people swallow, in a way, that there is this entertaining thing around it. And then this is the message that I want you to remember. I want you to remember the client name. And obviously, if you're doing a good job and the business is doing a good job, you actually have something really interesting to say. So the whole point of a legacy ad is we have this wrapper of this entertaining style of thing that we're doing. But really, the thing that's always meant to be remembered is legacy heating and cooling. And in every single ad, it's that they have no interest and no payments for 1 year. That's the thing we're trying to get people to remember. So there's the entertainment value, and then there's the actual message that is within it that ends up being what matters. Because you can be, the thing with a funny ad is you can be really entertaining an ad and still have it be a really bad ad. You see them all the time. Whenever you think about going to Thanksgiving dinner, and grandpa or whoever will be talking about it, you see that ad where the guy does this and all that. And that's a great ad. And everyone talks about it. And people like me who work in advertising always like to pull out who is that for? I don't remember. It's a bad ad in the end.
That's the old EDS short-haired cats Super Bowl ad. Nobody remembers who that was for, but it was an amazing ad. We loved it, but nobody remembers who it was for.
So then it was a bad ad in the end. Doesn't matter. You're not spending money to entertain people. You are spending money to get people to remember a business in the end.
So Adam, do you think the role of audio has evolved in recent years?
I'm not sure if it's changed so much. Maybe there's just more ways to use it. It's the evolution of audio, I would think, is that there's just so many more places. People are doing podcasts like this where it makes sense to have stuff like that. There's so many more people are listening to audio in so many different ways now. You get it on your phone and smart speakers and everything like that. People are consuming so much more. There's just so many more places to do it. Spotify has advertising on it now. I think it's becoming more and more common, and people are generally not really noticing that that's the case.
Yeah. So would you say that for brands like Legacy, there's a bit of a shift in strategy, or a change in strategy, that there's more mindful use of audio complementing other mediums?
Well, the way I would describe that, and honestly, working from the radio side of things, it still can be an uphill battle because the world is so digital right now, and people love to see their dashboards and their metrics. And radio specifically has a little bit of a trust element to it of what you're getting across. And it's hard, if you're talking about being audacious, building a brand using radio is audacious these days because people are so addicted to having their dashboards and digital advertising. And there's a lot of stuff you could do with digital, and it is extremely important. In my own biased opinion, I can't find too many more mediums where you can actually build a feeling about your business and get it across to people in the same way as having 30 seconds to talk about it. Or in the US, usually it's 60 seconds. That's what I think is an audacious thing, specifically with the industry that I'm in, is actually deciding to go, I would like to say something about myself instead of just buying AdWords and something. Obviously, I'm not saying that entirely with digital. There's ways to make a YouTube ad where you're telling a story and so on as well. Yeah. But radio is specifically story, TV ads are specifically story as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting thing about story, one of the things I was trained at when I worked for IBM is stories sell better than statistics or math or ROI. Stories sell. And
everything I build is based on storytelling. That's the best way. People, it's one of the biggest parts of being human. Is storytelling. That's built within our brains. We're made to consume it.
I think that we want the statistics and the facts, and we want all those things really to convince us that the story that we've heard or the story that we tell ourselves inside our head about the thing is actually true.
It's justified, yeah. Let's listen to the nicest rap version of this clip.
Sipping gin and juice, just trying to stay cool. But I'm sweating like a heathen in Sunday school. Cruise to Heritage Mall to enjoy some AC. Then my shorty hears the homies from Legacy. I say, listen, yo, where we gonna get the dough to pay Legacy from the radio? She says, Legacy Heating's got a deal that's the bomb, with no interest or payments flipping all year long. No money, no problems, that's the life that I choose. Chillaxing with thousands of BTU. Doing whatever the heck that was. That's how you build a legacy. Legacy Heating and Cooling.
Dude, you just took me back to high school. That's awesome.
Yeah, I like to have a real line between stupid and fun. A big stupid element that lets people be included in the fun is important to me.
Do you remember the first time that somebody, a client let you do kind of what I would consider over the top fun like that?
Yeah, I guess that's a funny thing. Like when you talk about how you can go and find free ads at radio stations from writers, I would say most of the best stuff that writers at radio stations and probably across ad agency as well, the best stuff that you ever write tends to be on the cutting room floor because it's hard to get somebody to approve that. So writers are always out there writing some really great stuff, but we need brave clients to be able to go out and actually say, yeah, you know what, I want to do it, which is always the strangest thing I could ever think of, is that somebody would spend tens of thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars on advertising and be too afraid to stand out. But it's absolutely the most common thing. Good ads are hard to approve. So,
tell us about that. Tell us about a time, a client comes to you and they want that cliched sort of, generic ad, and you convinced them to be bold.
Oh man, that's all the time, and convincing to be bold is the tougher part. Like I can think of one specifically where it maybe even goes a little bit the other way around, of a client that was airing cliched ads that weren't really doing anything, and they bought into their advertising campaign and they really didn't want to just quit at that point, which really says something about them as well, because a lot of them will be like, yeah, I'm not seeing something after this amount of time, let's
I tried radio and it didn't work, is a common refrain, right? But
honestly, I work in sales, and the answer I always have to that is I'm not surprised. Tell me what happened, and then you talk about it, because the message makes the biggest difference on it. The message and the schedule with what you run it on. So when people say that, they come back and say, yeah, I bought 5 ads a week for 3 weeks and nothing happened. I'm like, well, of course nothing happened. Or you ask them about their ad and so send me the ad, and you're like, oh my God, of course you got nothing out of this. So when I say 90% of radio ads suck, that means 90% of radio clients go through it going, radio doesn't work. But we all know that every medium can work and cannot work depending on how well you do the creative on it. But this one client decided to go, okay, we need something else. And they found me and asked me to, based off some of the, I can't remember what client, but based off of some other client that I had worked for, asked me to make ads for them in the end. So I ended up making some of my, these type of ads that you're hearing that are stupid and fun at the same time. That was Mr. Rooter specifically. And they've been going for years now. And they've actually gone so far that at times they have to shut off their digital advertising because they're getting too much out of their radio. And that's the big thing. Like radio is the top of your sales funnel, where you're having awareness to hundreds of thousands of people who are getting idea, and they remember things about you. They've actually had something like those legacy ads that go in their mind that makes your business be top of mind when they're ready to use you. Whereas a lot of digital advertising really is just hand to mouth stuff. It's the bottom of the funnel, like where you are. So it's really valuable finding people who are ready to buy right now. But if you shut that off, your business is dead advertising wise, right on the spot. So Mr. Rooter, we went out and did some ridiculous stuff for them.
Your toilet holds a mystery. An unknown clog has bunged up your bowl. Mr. Rooter can help by, it's a toothbrush. Oh, still good. To solve your plumbing mysteries, get mystery with Mr. Rooter Plumbing.
Yeah, that definitely sticks in your head. What was the process? Talk to me about the process of, they were running ads already, and then you got them to this.
Yeah, so they had cliched ads on before, and then they went to me to write something that was a little different. We've actually evolved since this, now that there's a Mr. Rooter character that is just having whatever adventures during it. It's always some sort of ridiculous thing like this. So it'll evolve through time. But the thing with this I liked was trying to get people to remember the name Mr. Rooter and taking it and making mysteries out of it. So we did a whole bunch of different mysteries to get mystery Mr. Rooter. But this one stood out big for people and was talked about quite a bit when it aired, because we made, I think, about 15 different versions of it. So everything was the same until whatever came out of that toilet. So we had 15 different items that came out of the toilet.
Right.
There's something cool to having something to listen to where people will hear it the first time, be amused by it. Then the next time you hear it, here's that ad, and all of a sudden it's different. Like, what the hell?
Surprises
you. It's an extra level of getting people to really
What's it going to be next time?
I'm perking up for the Mr. Rooter ad because I'm curious to hear what's coming out of the toilet on the Mr. Rooter ad.
So you just dream that up like out of the blue? Like, what is your process for approaching that and coming up with that creative?
I wish I had like better advice on creative writing stuff, but for me, like it kind of comes a little naturally that I usually just let an idea pop in. Then I'm like, I just write it out. But like if I had advice, the best advice I could give on creative writing, because it is hard, and there are lots of times where I'm stuck trying to figure out something for a client and I really want something good. The best advice I could give about creative writing is just start writing. Write your crappy ad first, because like everybody,
it has to come out of you.
Yeah, you got to do that. And once you start writing your crappy ad, or whatever you're doing, if you're writing a story, once you start writing your crappy story that you're not really happy about and you're grumbling about doing it, all of a sudden the idea will come into your head and you'll get better. But the process of actually putting fingers to keys and writing something will help you pull something good out. So that's one of my processes if I'm having trouble writing something specifically, and it pretty much always works. But yeah, you have to fight your own nature on these things too, because even still at the beginning, I want to write ads that sound like crappy ads. Like that still is something that I have to fight back and go, okay. But a really good way to get around that too is to think about whatever industry you're working in, write the cliched ad and then go completely opposite to it. Like throw all of that out the window and go in the completely different direction on it. That might not be where you land, but it's another good process to finding the spaces that aren't being used and positioning clients in ways that work. Obviously, the client has to match that when you get back to them. But
I read a really good book that addresses that very thing. It was called The War of Art, and just about how we're our own worst critic. We get stuck in those crappy ads. We get stuck in writing that stuff. And so just write through it, write it out. And very same message.
I'd say that's probably also one of the reasons why a lot of the ads that you'll get from like junior writers that might be employed at radio stations or really anywhere. Honestly, I've found like a lot of agencies are not excited about making radio ads. So they'll give it to their most junior writers. And I've heard a lot of even like receptionists getting to write ads. Like nothing against receptionists. Everyone has creativity. But something that I've always found, which I did the same thing and everybody has their growing pains going through, when you start creative writing for radio ads and probably for anything, you do write the ads that you've heard, and it takes a while or a good mentor to get you through. Because it makes sense when you're starting it out, you're thinking, well, I've heard these. This must be what works. So I would like to do things that emulate things that I've heard on air, because that means that I'm doing a good job on it. And really, it's the worst thing you can do.
90%, yeah.
It's almost like what you see on people do on resumes or CVs. I'm motivated, hard worker. Who cares?
Yeah, all the stuff that's just like blah, blah, blah. We should start working on lies on our CVs here.
They wrote a book about it. It's called Catch Me If You Can. It's a true story. Frank Abagnale Jr. and it's fantastic.
Well, the funny thing
he did pass the bar, so he was smart.
The funny thing is that the whole story is in dispute now. That it might actually be totally made up.
It's still a good story though. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
A lie within a lie.
Yeah. So you were talking earlier about how hard it is to get people to buy in. So can you kind of take us through how you do that part? How do you actually convince people to sign off on ads like this?
And as part of that question, like who at these companies, I imagine some of these are small business, some of them are not small businesses. Does it have to go all the way up to the ownership to go, okay, fine, or is there like who all has to get bought in on this? Is that a pretty involved process for you?
Oh my God, yeah, it's the worst. It's the hardest part. So what I would say generally is you're not really ever going to sell something to somebody that doesn't want it. You can try all you want. I find those situations when somebody puts something on the air that they're really not excited about doing aren't going to work out regardless, especially in a medium like radio where there's some trust and understanding about you don't have that dashboard and all that. So they build their own stories on it. To be honest, the ads that tend to work the best are the ones where the client has a hand in writing them and feels like they have some ownership of it, because then they just decide that it's worked as well. So there's a lot of really bad ads that work because the client wrote it. But honestly, in the end with those things, and I've found this throughout my career, and I try not to fight too hard against it, is that you will be connected to the people who are also audacious and want to do things. Right. Like if you have to do a lot of pushing to get somebody outside of their comfort level to do it, it's rarely going to happen. Or maybe I'm just a crappy salesperson. I don't know. But, I like surrounding myself with clients who have the same goals on things and want to stand out. And those have always been my best clients, who are my partners on things. Because I always find when I go on this, I consider myself to be part of the business. Like I'm not somebody who's writing something going, go on your way and have fun. Like when I talk about legacy, I talk about we. Like that's our business. We're working together on it. We're equal parts in building this brand together. And it has to be that way, because there's also that part, like I just referenced earlier. If I make the most ridiculous ad and make a company sound completely fun and that they do all these things, and then somebody's sold and goes, yeah, I'm going to call this place, and they are not that company, it's still not going to work with it if they fall down at it. So like what you're talking about does have to exist by the time the customer gets to that business, or it's still a fail. So there's multiple levels that work on that. But yeah, it's always finding the people who want to take that journey with you and are ready. There's sometimes a lot of, even those people take some convincing sometimes. And often that's me telling them that, like when I reveal an ad and there's silence on the other end and they look kind of scared, that's kind of the perfect response that I look for on things a lot of times. Because then I say, like, you're scared about this for a reason, because you're worried it'll stand out. You know, you're worried about maybe the complaints that might come in, because they do. People will complain about anything. I don't know if you noticed the internet or anything like that. People love to complain. So if you put a lot of personality out there, people will complain about your business. You know, there might be 98% of people are absolutely thrilled to death. Like Legacy is a really good example of that. Every time I put out an ad for them, like they get a lot of fanfare. People really love it. They'll reach out and say, yeah, I love those ads. But there is the 2% of people who reach out and complain that you said heathen in Sunday school on it. And that's not cool. We got lots of people on the dad in the Speedo ad that'll reach out and go like, how come you don't talk about how mom would be gross? And like, you'll get these, like, it's usually like 60-year-old men who are going, you know, dad works all day long and he puts food on the table, and you guys are out there making, I'll never shop with you guys. And like, luckily I have a good partnership with the guys who run there. They actually just send me all those and are really amused by them. Like they answer them and get to them and everything like that. But I've always said along the way that complaints are a good thing. Like complaints are a sign that things are actually doing really well and you're getting response to it. Like
people are hearing it.
Yeah, like obviously I don't want it to be that there's 100% complaints and nobody's reacting in a positive way, but having a decent amount of complaints while things are going really well, that's great. And to be honest, you have to be ready for it, because it is hard to hear people complain about your business even if things are going well. So I have had really good campaigns die because the client couldn't take having any negative come through as well, which is another thing that you have to be prepared for if you really want to succeed on things, is having a little bit of thick skin.
I'm hearing some parallels into the things that we've started identifying as we've done a lot of introspection on our business and who we're trying to go after, who are our good partners, who are, you know, et cetera. And it's a one word: trust.
Yeah.
Like if you have trust in your client, and we've said no to clients that were significantly sized clients because we realized there was not going to be a trust there, trust that we had their best interest at heart. If there wasn't trust there, we were going to fight constantly, and that was just going to be annoying and not worth the money. These people have to trust you enough that you have their best interest at heart and you are the expert. And they have to trust that even if it goes bad, that's okay too. And that you have to trust that they're going to follow through. Trust is a big deal. And that's part of being bold, is you're trusting in your ability, you're trusting in the person you're partnered with, et cetera. Just realizing that's something just really kind of comes back to all of this, and don't put your trust in the wrong thing.
Well, that's a tough thing. It's something you have to set up in advance too, like radio specifically. If we're talking about starting a radio brand, like it takes months for it to start to work. Like it takes a while for people to hear it enough that they start to react. So there is a lot of setting up that trust in advance and letting people know, like, you are not going to like me very much for a few months here, and you're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars to see not very much happen. That's a really hard thing to get businesses through, is, you know, like you have to be ready to do that. So I've turned down clients who were go, no, I'd like to test it for a month. And you go like, no, you're just going to throw money out the window, and I don't want that for you either. So it's always important to be matched with the right people. And going back to the back half of your question there too, what you have to do to get things through. Like a lot of times it is the one person who owns the company who's like, yeah, let's go on it. The worst thing ever is approval by committee. And that goes for any decision whatsoever. Your idea will always be boiled down to a crappier version of it if you ask more and more people. And a lot of people do that, though, where they'll take it around the whole office and ask questions and like, what do you think about this? And here's the thing about asking anybody a question about something, they will choose to have a response about it, especially if it's your employees. They're going to want to look like they're really smart and go, you know what? I think maybe this, and then things just get complicated and weird. So really, I don't mind the idea of asking for people's opinions, but there needs to be one person who makes the decision, and you should trust your experts.
Yeah. So that's probably one of the things you ask up front is, who's the decision maker, and is this done by a committee? Because if it's a committee, you're going to have a hard time steering through it, aren't you?
Yeah, I usually don't jump off to that right off the top, but it probably wouldn't be a terrible thing to do. But when it comes to committee, I'm always there to go, hey, when you take it to committee, it's always going to be a worse version of itself if you get too many people.
Is there a significant price difference in cliche versus non-cliche, or are the people who just write really bad cliche ads charging the same amount as people who write really good ads, and it's just the luck of the guy who finds you? Or what's the market of that even?
Well, it's all coming to the person that you're talking to, and it's always going to be people who connect. Again, like there's lots of people who are not going to connect with me whatsoever in my style of doing things. And that doesn't mean that they're going to be doing something bad because they're not using me. There's lots of people who do different styles of things that will work out fine. There's lots of people who are more analytical than I might be. I'm more of a big idea person versus big data. I think both are valuable and should be used together, but I definitely stray more over to the big idea thing. So I'm going to attract those type of people who are the same as well. But I would say that it's all across the board. There are lots of like 21-year-old year one creative people working for a radio station who will write you the best damn ad that you've ever heard. And there are lots of people who have been working for 30 years and charging you tens of thousands of dollars for an ad in an agency who are going to give you the biggest flaming pile of turd that you're ever going to hear. I don't think it comes down to dollars, because to be honest, usually when I see ads come in, radio ads specifically coming in from agency, I'm shaking my head a lot about like, why are they paying so much money for this bad ad? Look at any car ad. Like I see that on the TV all the time. They make the same ad over and over again. Here's a car driving through probably Montreal or over a bridge in Vancouver, and we're going to say a bunch of cliches about this, that, and the other thing. And you're not going to even remember what brand it was for. Like, it drives me crazy. They don't do anything to try to make sure that it's remembered. But a lot of them are doing it because they want to win awards too. So there's a lot of awards being given out for bad ads. But a lot of times it's the measurement of success for agencies and for the businesses who are buying the ads.
It's funny you bring up the car thing and older writers versus young writers. I was literally doing a test drive of a truck and had this probably mid-late 50s guy on the car salesman, and at one point he goes, "Do you like this truck?" And I said, "Yeah." He was like, "Well, it likes you." I literally stopped the truck in the middle of the road and looked at him and said, "Bob, you're better than that." I said, "Or maybe you're not." And I just drove back to the dealership, got out, and got my vehicle and left. I'm like, I can't. I just can't.
Oh yeah, it can be so bad. Honestly, like the only car ad I can think of off the top of my head is probably 15 plus years old that I really left it knowing what the car was for and I could remember it. I always remember it was when Toyota released the Yaris, however you want to call it. I remember their ad line was they had weird old Uncle Yaris. And I want to remember it as like some like older guy with a lot of hair, and the car was just doing weird stuff, but they were always talking like Uncle Yaris. And it was really easy to remember Yaris through it.
Right.
Like it might not have been the most amazing thing in the world, but I remembered the name in the end. And like that really is job number one.
It's funny, we were joking as we were preparing for this. On the previous episode, we played this game, and Weldon just made up this, thank you for calling Bob's Drywalling. And we went, you could just substitute the word plumbing in there, right?
Totally, yeah.
So many times, best greatest service, whatever.
We've been in this community for 22 years, and we are grateful for your service. Oh, my God.
Yeah, we all know them. And it is something that I say all the time. It's on my website, it's everywhere, that if you can cross your business's name out of a script and put your competitors in, it's not a good enough ad.
Yeah. Play us another one of those Mr. Rooter variants, Chester.
Your toilet holds a mystery. An unknown clog has bunged up your bowl. Mr. Rooter can help by... Oh, yep, it was an old doll's head. Creepy. To solve your plumbing mysteries, get mystery with Mr. Rooter Plumbing.
I immediately see the standard creepy doll head, yeah.
I think the only one that didn't go to air was we had one with Colombian cocaine, but that one didn't make the cut. Right? It was a pretty good one.
That would be awesome.
Tell us about this next client, Oodle Noodle, and we'll play their jingle in a minute.
Yeah, Oodle Noodle would have been one of the first clients that allowed me to do things the way I do, was Oodle Noodle. They're a chain of restaurants here in Edmonton, Alberta, and they are just the funnest guys in the world. And they are just willing to take any idea and give it a try. And they just want it to be as ridiculous as possible. Whenever they ask for a new ad, they're always like, just make it even more ridiculous. They just want to push it absolutely ridiculous levels. Actually, I find that a lot with some of my clients, is that they get used to my stuff, and then it's harder and harder to get an ad approved because they just want it to just escalate more.
It's not over the top enough.
Yeah. So these guys, like, I think you're going to, if you play the 50s jingle one first, that was like, this one's got to be 15 plus years old now. And it was one of the first times I made one of these, I call them bad jingles, because they're not the polished type of, personally, I think the polished jingles are usually just really cheesy and crappy. Whereas these ones are meant to sound like they're a big, crappy thing, but they're fun, people can tell when it's fun. It's almost satire in the end, and so we did it in the old jingle style, which is fun to hear come off the air, and really people aren't used to hearing that now, so it is something that pops out, but it can get stuck in your head. In the end, jingles really do work. We've been talking a lot about how the brain works, and with storytelling and firewalls and all that. Another thing is, like, we do remember things musically really easily, but you have to watch out what type of jingles you use in the end, because you are attaching your brand to it. And a lot of the ones, in my personal opinion, that are the regular jingles, usually car dealerships have them, are cheesy as hell. And then your brand is cheesy. And sure, people are remembering it, but you end up being cheesy, and you spend $5,000 to $10,000 on buying one of these jingles, and you spend that money, so you want to use it forever. And you really should use it if you're going to spend the money on it. But I like these ones because I could do it for people for cheaper, and they stick out and they're fun. And then you're not tied to it forever as well.
Let's have a listen to Oodle Noodle. This is their 50s jingle.
When it's getting late and you think you'd like some food, we deliver really late.
At Oodle Noodle.
Friday night, Saturday night, until 3 a.m.
We deliver really late.
We deliver really late.
Maybe it's the service, maybe it's the price.
Maybe it's the way we comb our hair. So when you're hungry late, you'll know what to do. Get some Oodle Noodle, eat some Oodle Noodle.
Till 3 a.m.
Call 278 78 77.
I love the slightly crackly, staticky sound that just bakes in that 50s feel.
You wanted that in there. It was a client request to have the applause at the end, which is maybe the most ridiculous thing in there. So that, there's some more storytelling in it, that whatever we just listened to was live, apparently.
Right.
Like, how stupid.
So this really is a case of you finding someone compatible with the way that you think anyway, or maybe you're compatible with the way that they think in terms of creative.
For sure. And like this last one here that I made, like another guy who's on it, a buddy of mine, like he's kind of a lot of times like a litmus test for each other on these when we make them. It's almost like when we make one that's really good, we should look at each other and go, we're such idiots. Like, that's the response. A slap on the knee. Oh my God, we're such massive idiots. Look what people are letting us put on the radio. And that's the that's the answer there. Like, I've had it a couple times where I have them on the same stations, and two or three of mine that are like this will go back to back to back, and I'll be like, listen to that stretch of radio.
But it's powerful, man. When you start talking about people getting in some people's minds and the things that are in their heads over and over. I mean, I hear my kids sing, Disney songs over and over. We have a really great partner down in South America named Sonido, and McGale de Narvaez is awesome. He writes jingles for politicians. And he has literally gotten like 8 of the last 9 presidents elected in Colombia because it gets in people's heads, and he's great at it. Has nothing. I'm sure these guys have great policies and whatever else, whatever. But
it doesn't matter.
That's what I mean, the power of the jingle.
Them, right?
But they remember the jingle, right?
Yeah.
I can see that working, because what's going to happen is they're going to arrive at the ballot, and then all of a sudden they're going to see the name and like, oh yeah, and that jingle will be in there. Oh, check mark that. That's what matters. That's the policies I want.
I had a good feeling about that one. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That would have applause at the end. Yes.
So
those guys really like them.
I do have a question, Adam, because you basically said you have to find people that like resonate with your approach, and if it's going to not resonate and it's going to go through committee and it's going to be a fight, it's not even worth trying that. So is there like a midway case where you kind of detect there's a little bit of a flame, and you can fan it and cultivate it to grow into an acceptance of this approach?
Oh yeah. I think generally most people want to have fun and do something that stands out, but it's very scary to do, and I appreciate that, especially when it is your baby, right? It's your business that you've built from the ground up. And now all of a sudden there's this weird bearded guy across the table who wants to do this absolutely off the wall thing that's going to change what people think about it for good. I totally appreciate that. That's a difficult thing to go for. That's always my argument there, is like, if this is sticking with you this much, you already know that it's something that's going to be sticking with other people as well. So it's really, and I'll always appreciate that decision. I'm never somebody that I'm a salesperson and a creative person. Like I'm left brain and right brain, but I will never try to push something that somebody does not quite feel comfortable with. I will explain, like if somebody's writing something for you, they damn well better be able to explain the cogs of why they believe this is going to work for you. Like the reasons why a script was written in a certain way, why this line is here, why we end it this way, why this element is, you should be able to sell people that way by saying like, look, I've put a lot of thought on this. I have experience. This is why this is going to work. And then ultimately it's their decision whether they want their business to sound that way, which is absolutely fair. But I like to put it in a position where I like to leave them in a spot where they go, yeah, this guy, I trust this guy. I believe what he's saying, but you do have to want your business to sound the way I'm asking it.
So how much of that are you writing to the company, writing for the company versus writing to their customer or for their customer?
It's 100% for the customer. Like that's the person, that's the person who matters. And that's where a lot of ads will get lost, is that they talk too much about the company. Like the ads should make the listener the hero of the story. That's who matters in it. Like people like hearing about themselves, that's why like when I'm writing a script, I write a lot of you and yours into it, and never any like, hey, all of you guys. Like nothing really makes me more mad when I hear ads come on. Oh God, we get this all the time. I don't know what the balance of where your podcast will be listened to, but yeah, I could always tell when some ad exec or writer from the States is writing an ad for Canada, because they think of Canada as just like there's like 10 people here or something. Every ad you get that comes out of the States goes, hey Canada, did you know blah blah blah? Like, are you really addressing the entire nation in your radio ad? Like, no, address one person. Talk to one person when you're talking to them, that always, that there's so many. I've heard them go back to back to back on the, hey Canada, hey Edmonton, like, oh.
So do you think that there are certain like verticals or types of products where this approach works easier with, or is it pretty uniform for you across the board?
Yes and no. There's ones that are easier to sell to, that just like you can imagine that different industries have similar type of people who are within them. And some don't. Like if you're talking, I'm loath to like act like all accountants are boring or something. It's not the case, but there are a lot more people who would be more reserved as well. The thing that I find within that I get excited about, if I can talk to industries that generally don't like to have any fun, is that they're the ones that's going to work for the best, because that's as far off as what they're normally be. Yeah, like it's important to try and veer away from everybody else, but people do get that idea that they should sound like everybody else in their category, which is absolutely insane. No, position yourself, be different. They do the same thing. Honestly, you see that with different verticals. who will only buy in certain ways. We're like, no, like dentists will buy mailers that go out to people's houses, and that's all dentists generally will do. And like car dealers really like radio, and then there's ones that'll only buy billboards, and it's funny because then they all end up in one place. And I'll often get ones you'll get two things that happen on it. It's really weird, where they'll come in and say, well, I have to be on your station because all my competitors are on there, so I better talk to them as well. And then when there's not many of them and you're in an industry that doesn't advertise on it, and they go on, they find out, oh, one other lawyer is on your radio station. Well, I can't be on there for somebody else. It'll work again.
So you want him to have all of the customers? Yeah. Noted.
So what I always tell people on that is like, it doesn't matter what anybody else is, who's on there. You're like, all that matters is your message and you positioning, like us positioning you in a way that you're talking to the people that you want to bring in. I don't care what anybody else in your industry is doing, but definitely harder to sell to industries that aren't used to standing out. But I always feel like they're the ones that have the most to gain by it as well.
Totally. Yeah.
My pattern matching mind to start saying, all right, talk to the group, talk to the individual, cliche, not cliche, stand out, not stand out. It's like there's this pattern that filters down and you've got the perfect fit. And if you just got to identify what those people are going to do, then you know you've got something to work with.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, I mean, you've explicitly kind of mentioned this technique, right, of developing the cliche and then essentially turning it upside down, right? Doing the exact opposite of that. So are there any like other techniques or books or anything that you've come across that, you know, can help in that process?
I can suggest a really great book that will work for radio. It'll work for pretty much anything. If you own a business and you want to be branding, one of the best that I've ever read is called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. And it goes really deep into how stories sell and it gets really methodical on how to specifically do it. Like a big part of it is something that I just mentioned recently here is that the customer is the hero in the story and you should base it around that. And the business itself is like the Yoda. They're the guide on it. And they actually do have he writes I believe it's like a 7-step way of doing things. And I only read this book in the last year or so, and I've been doing this for 20 years or so. And there's a lot of good stuff to remember and a lot of really good points on it. But it was also one that made me feel good because, like, I do that. I'm great. Great. You know, it's something that.
This is why these are working.
Yeah, like whenever, but it kind of was a good one to keep me on track too. But like, there is so much value in that book. And
Tell us the name again.
It's called Building a Story Brand.
Building a Story Brand. We'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And it's not even a really long read either. So
which is good for us dumb sales guys. That's perfect. So as the dumb sales guy, I frequently have things go horribly wrong. I would love to know of sometime we kind of teased this earlier about the Saskatchewan Premier getting a little upset. Tell us the story.
So the Canadian Football League has lots of rivalries within it. We have a team that was called the Edmonton Eskimos. They're called the Edmonton Elks now. Back then, I wrote some ads for them, and it was just trash talking. Like, just I'm a fan of everything, so I know a lot about it. So we would just always write something about the city or the team. The Saskatchewan Roughriders are like religion to people in the whole province of Saskatchewan. That's year long. That's all they think about. But it's also tragic and funny for people who cheer for other teams that they just never win. It never happens. They've won like 4 Grey Cups in 100 years, but they are absolutely the most passionate fans in the CFL. So I think it took like 7 weeks or so before the trash talking Saskatchewan ads came on. And when those ones went on, they went nuts and became a news story across the country of specifically a few words that I used within it that really took them crazy into being like chalkboard material and everything for the teams. It went that deep. Lots of sports writers writing about it. Lots of radio stations calling on us. Like actually the stations that I work for were based out of Saskatchewan, and they have a news station there that covers the Riders. And they ended up calling our station in Edmonton and going, "Have you guys heard this ad? Like, do you know where it came from? Who made it? Like, we want to try and talk to people who made it." And they were like, "Idiots, we made it." Like, what are you talking about? Your own company made it. Sell that.
Let's have a listen.
The Saskatchewan Roughriders have fantastic fans, even if they are horrible human beings. They're all coming to Commonwealth this Friday. Taste their delicious tears. Support your Eskimos. Tickets at the gate or at Ticketmaster starting at $32.50.
Yeah, horrible
awesome.
human beings didn't go over very well. You can Google that, horrible human beings and Eskimos, and find a lot of articles written about it. A lot of people. I spent a lot of time reading that.
Also, taste their terrible tears. Is that what you said?
They're delicious.
They're delicious tears. Yeah.
Yeah,
so
Such a
visceral.
great line. That's such a great line.
yeah, no, that worked really well. There's lots of people that hated us on that, and like if you go through the news articles, there's lots that'll have people interviewing about how it's just terrible advertising. How dare the Eskimos do this type of thing? And I did find a bunch that I appreciated from other agencies in town. They were like, this is a perfect ad. Look, there's news stories being written about it. What are you talking about? Like the game, like Commonwealth Stadium has 60,000 seats in it, and it was the biggest. It was the biggest crowd of the year. Like I think it was close to selling out for that game. This just became a fever pitch for everybody. I know, like the guy who voiced the ad there with me is a buddy of mine, and I remember when it became such a big deal. We were talking about like we should start printing horrible human beings T-shirts and go to the game, and then just sell them to all the Saskatchewan fans. And be like, yeah, this is ridiculous. And then at the end, like rip it off and be like, we made that ad. We got
But I mean, that's the thing, right? Is you had like a small amount of airtime, really, at the end of the day with this ad. But this was back in 2014, and people made T-shirts. Horrible human beings took off as a hashtag. I mean, the Google articles are still there. It's created this whole digital legacy, like this footprint attached to the brand, and so arguably that's a good thing, right?
How long did that take you to write that?
15 seconds.
Even better. I'm so wondering.
Sometimes it's just the passion's there, and I know what I want to say and all that. And like maybe I got lucky with the horrible human beings things. You're always going to find some lightning in a bottle on that.
So
I remember being really nervous about the game coming up because it was an important game, and all of a sudden, like the teams were talking about it and like how that they'd say that about us, and like I was like, oh god, I hope my team doesn't lose based off of something that I wrote in the radio. We shut them out, so it was fine in the end. Yeah.
So at the time, did it feel like damage control had to be done, or was just
actually that's a bad story on here in the end, because after that we didn't do that anymore. The Eskimos chickened out and didn't want to do anything. So like I was not pumped about that we ended up, because then we ended up doing meh style ads afterwards, and it was like this wasn't through my company Airsport, this was working for a radio station, so I didn't have as much pull on that, but they did appreciate it, so they didn't go in and say, hey, you guys are jerks and it is all bad or anything. Like they did appreciate that it had worked well, but they got gun shy off of it and stopped doing that style afterwards.
Yeah, who would want sellouts all the time? I mean, that sounds horrible.
yeah. Like I would keep going, but that's the thing. It's the appetite for being able to handle having thick skin and continue with things.
I guess the lesson is, right, you can make lemonade out of it. And I mean, even if that means they gun shy afterwards, that's, as long as there's a way to make lemonade out of it, right?
Well, totally. Well, I'd say like we're using this as the example of something that went wrong, but I'd say this is one of the ones that went the most right out of anything I've had. Like a little 15-second local radio ad bursting up so much that it becomes national news and gets people passionate and caring about CFL football and going to the games. Like, why are we putting things on the air? This is the result we want.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. Is there a production that's the most memorable to you, like one of your favorites, like your most favorite one maybe that you want us to play?
I don't know. There's so many that I like. I don't know if there's one off the top of my head that's like this is my Mr. Holland's opus. But there is one from recently that is just maybe the most ridiculous one that I've ever done, and so like for that reason I think that's worth playing. It's another Oodle Noodle one, and it is maybe the stupidest thing that's ever aired on a radio station ever.
Here we go.
Noodle noodle nood noodle nood noodle nood oodle noodle noods. Noodle noodle nood 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 oodle noodle nood oodle nood oodle noodle 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 nood noodle nood noodle nood oodle noodle noods. Noodle noodle nood, 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 oodle noodle nood. Troll down to Oodle Noodle tonight because dine-in is open.
And people were calling in to request that, right? To request
Yeah, there was a lot of requests for that one to play. Like that's just based off of that. I don't know if you remember the viral video of the Trollolo guy.
Yeah.
So it was just one of that. Yeah, that got stuck in people's heads so much. Like people talk about that a lot. It did result in a big boost in sales for the restaurant and all that. And I don't know, just when you talk about clients that have bravery on putting things on, like there's some more applause that can go to Oodle Noodle on it, approving things like that. You know,
It almost sounds like you need to go to a sales model where, like, I'll write this ad for free. I just get a percentage of any increase.
yeah, some people do that.
Adam, we really, really appreciate you joining us today and for sharing this wisdom that you've developed over all these years. I mean, I think there's a lot of gold in there. And so I actually want to invite our audience, if they have any follow-up questions, any of this they want us to delve into more, please submit it to us. You can find our particulars on our CUBEmc.com website. And I mean, I think it's awesome. There's so much to learn here, so many ideas, so many creative approaches that I think we should all be taking in our audio, right?
Adam, and I'll say it this way, from the sales side and just from a listener, you're making the world a better place. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, no, it's just be fun. That's it. Be fun and have purpose.
That's it.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, sir.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It was fun.
Thanks so much, Adam.
You know that guy, the irritating Saskatchewan Roughriders fan. Sorry, that's redundant. The Saskatchewan Roughriders fan. He's loud, obnoxious, and somehow manages to brag about his team winning a dominant 4 championships in just over a century. That guy. Well, he's going to the Eskimo game today. And you should go too, to watch his entire world crumble around him. Support your Eskimo. Tickets at the gate or at Ticketmaster starting at $32.50.
That is so
awesome.
great. That is so great.